Okay.
Good morning, fellow Toastmasters and all of you potential Toastmasters out there. Welcome to Wake Up with Toastmasters. I am your host for today, and I know you're expecting Scott Transu. Scott is recovering from laryngitis and a head cold, so I'm going to be filling in for him today. So if you tuned in expecting Scott, don't worry, he will be back next week. Of course, with me today is my lovely co-host, distinguished Toastmaster, past district director, Phyllis Trivy. Good morning, Phyllis.
Good morning. How are we doing today? And how are all our people out in our Facebook land?
Well, I hope everyone is okay. I do need to check our Facebook land, but
while you check our page, I will tell people that we are looking for comments all during this meeting. Ken will be checking his second computer for comments and questions. So please put them in there. We love to hear from our audience. Also, if you're seeing this tomorrow, today, the afternoon, whenever you're seeing this, if you've got a comment, we will read it. So please comment and let us know what you're thinking. Also, we prepare these meetings, or Ken does. So if there's a topic that you'd like to know more about and you want him to delve into it, he loves research and we would love to talk to you about that particular subject. So that's another comment you can make. Tell us what you'd like to know about.
Thank you, Phyllis. That's great. A good intro, because you're absolutely right. If you have something that you would like us to present or to research for you and present on the show, we'd be happy to do that. I did check our Facebook page. We are live. Everything is good. So I do have one foot in both screens, just in case there are questions. Now, one of the things that I thought we'd talk about today is to sort of revisit a previous discussion that we had about giving online presentations. Mm-hmm. And here's why. We're starting to enter contest season, as you know. And contest season this year is going to be very different. And that's because it's hybrid. This is the first time that Toastmasters International has given us that option. Sometimes, if you know TI, they can be a little dictatorial. So they said, okay, you have two options this year. You can either do an online contest or you can do a hybrid. Those are your options. So last year it was, you can either do online or you can do in person. So we did some streaming last year, and some of the complaints, I guess I should say, or concerns, was our equipment was not always the best, and that's a valid complaint because we don't have. We did buy some equipment for the district that we're going to be testing out soon and using, that will hopefully make our hybrid contest a little bit better, because we want to make sure that we give all contestants the best opportunity that we possibly can for them to participate. Even if they can't make it in person, their online experience should be comparable. I can't say it's going to be the same because it is still online versus in person. But to the best of our ability, we want to make it a complete experience. We want to have good equipment. And another part of the problem that we've run into is the Wi-Fi availability. At some of the venues where we have had presentations where we've started to try and nail down our abilities, some of the Wi-Fi has been less than wonderful. So we're going to talk about some presentation tips if you're online. This came about, as Phyllis said, I like to do some research. I love to create presentations, whether it's just kind of an impromptu presentation or with PowerPoint and what have you. And I came across some of this material in Toastmasters magazine and in a new document that they have that's online and hybrid meetings best practices.
Yes.
And then to top that off, one of our guest hosts here, Doris Tuckett, who is the president of Toastmasters in the Kitchen, during one of our discussions, she said, "Hey, Ken, I've got a friend. She lives in Canada, but she's a member of Toastmasters, president of Toastmasters in the Kitchen, and she's a member of another club in Texas." And she said, "We have this fellow in Texas named Kyle Mitchell, who is just fantastic with hybrid meetings and contests. He's their logistics manager for District 55. He is also their podcast creator and host and what have you. They have a podcast. We don't have that yet. It's coming. We should have it. But anyway, so he's going to be one of our guests at our educational enrichment night on the 14th. So I thought, well, this is a great time to review this and talk about online presentations. So of course, I have a PowerPoint. But before I get that,
we cannot live without a PowerPoint. And that's the best thing about a Zoom presentation is you do an easy presentation through PowerPoint.
Well, and I'm addicted to PowerPoint. I'm sorry. I can't seem to get away with it. But I was good. Before I get into it, though, I wanted to sort of throw the discussion to you, Phyllis, and have you talk for a minute, because I know you're in Holistic and in Causmasters, and both do hybrid meetings. So that's just one step away from doing a hybrid contest, right? So tell me about that.
Because if something goes wrong in your regular meeting, well, it's okay. We'll fix it the next time around. Or if we're 5 or 10 minutes late because we're fixing something, that's okay too. But what I found is that if you have a small room, and maybe it has to do with the Wi-Fi, it's how do you find a free room with $1 million Wi-Fi? Not happening too often. But I found it was very easy for us in our smaller room to get set up, and it works every time. But we have a nice large room, and it produces echoes. It has a wonderful wall screen that we can project things on. But, it takes longer to get set up because it just seems like it's a storage type room. Not really what you call it, but I mean, people are moving things around in there in different locations. And then that means that, the equipment has to be in different locations to offset whatever it's echoing against. And the walls are further out. Well, the bigger the room, the more problems it seems to be like we've had. But, we do our thing and make it happen so that we can have online visitors. And I feel like an in-person meeting gives you so much more benefit from Toastmasters. But, there are people that visit us on their lunch hour, and are some that are out of state. And so we need to have this hybrid type meeting to make it work for everyone. And the technicians get used to where it is. Now it's like the X marks the spot. This is where we had the computer last week and it worked really well. Let's try it again. This is where we put the lectern. Let's try that again. And if it works 2 or 3 times in a row, that's the place.
It sounds like, superstitious. You throw salt over your shoulder. Remember, if you spill the salt, make sure your lectern is in exactly the same spot. X marks the spot. But you're right. Technology presents its own challenges. And a big part of that is the equipment. But an even bigger part is because you can now buy really, really quite good. I picked up for the district a really nice webcam for less than $100. And I think we're going to be testing that out and making sure everything works as good as it can. But I think that's one of the lessons learned. But the bigger issue is always going to be Wi-Fi. And I know that where we're going to have the conference this year in May, They have wired Wi-Fi, so I think we're going to be in pretty good shape. Well, anyway, I want to pull this up. Let me share my screen if I can. I can find what I'm looking for.
Talking about contests, and I am wondering if people are speaking online and there's technical problems, is that an extra 30 seconds? Is that the same as something going wrong with the clock? Are they allowing anything like that?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, because if technical issues do arise, there is a provision in the instruction manual, if you will, on hybrid contests and what have you, that you, to the best of your ability, you don't count that. You get it going. As an example that they give, suppose you have someone who's in the middle of a speech and their Wi-Fi goes down and the screen goes blank. You try to get them back on, and you don't penalize them for that at all, but just let them pick up where they left off. You don't start over, pick up where you left off and move on. I think that's a big challenge, but particularly for the judge, it's a little challenging to overlook something like that. And that may be an extreme case where you just lose your Wi-Fi, but certainly it's entirely possible that your screen freezes or something happens in the middle of a presentation. And then what do? Well, that's the response that when you do the research on what does TI consider best practices, you move on. You don't start over. You just pretend that never happened and move on. So that'll be a challenge. But as I said, I wanted to go over this. We've presented this before, so some of it may be a little bit redundant, but I got this from, I went to, and I'll give the references at the end of this brief presentation here, in Toastmasters magazine. And also, I want to make sure folks know about that new book. So anyway, starting out, we talk about evolution, and I found this cartoon about the evolution of the species as this comes to an abrupt stop during the digital age. You see the folks looking down at their cell phone and walking into a wall. I thought, wow, that's really appropriate, because the way we have evolved has created this dependency, or maybe it's an obsession with technology. And I don't know about you, but I check my email several times a day. I look at my phone several times a day. So it really has become, I don't know, addiction, obsession, whatever you want to call it. Our technology has to some degree taken over, because we went from in-person, of course, and we embraced that, and we still do embrace in-person meetings and what have you. But then we were forced to an online world because of the pandemic. And now we are dealing with putting those two together in a hybrid format. So that's the challenge for us now, is to combine the in-person and the online into the hybrid format, and to the extent that we possibly can, make it a very meaningful experience for all participants, whether they're online or in person. Won't be the same, but it will be meaningful. Now, the reason that we have to address these things is because of the different types of communication modules and tools that we have before us. And here I've got an illustration of some of them. These are all what I think of as expanded communication options. When we were growing up, Phyllis, I think you and I are not too far apart in age, but I can remember that we had the radio or the television or the newspaper. And those were our primary communication tools. Those were the options that we had before us. And I even remember when we only had 2 television stations. We had CBS and NBC. and then ABC came along, and then Fox came along. So that's part of my childhood. Now we have things like Facebook. We are live on Facebook right this moment. So that just tells you what a tool it can be. We have YouTube. We could also put this on YouTube. We do have a YouTube channel. And as a district, I don't think we've used it as much as we probably should. There's TikTok, which I know very little about, but I understand is a very fun kind of app. Twitter. Twitter's been in the news, of course, because of the takeover by Elon Musk. LinkedIn. We're about to start a TI marketing program that focuses on using LinkedIn because of the people who often use that platform are a perfect target audience for Toastmasters. They're business people who are sort of putting themselves out there, their profiles and what have you. And one of the things that many of them could benefit from is improving their speaking and leadership skills. Then, of course, there's Instagram, and we have podcasts. And a couple of weeks ago, we were fortunate enough to have Nadia Gelbs come up. She did an educational enrichment night on how to do podcasts. And in pathways, a couple of the pathways have as an option when you're up to level 5, creating a podcast. So the point here is the expanded communication options that we have are both good and bad. They're good because we have the opportunity to reach more in a hybrid setting, if you will, or through the use of Zoom and other computer programs. But that does increase the technical complexity and the expertise that we have to learn. And then finally, webinars. You can learn so much just sitting in on a webinar, and TI periodically has them. And in fact, you can go back through the TI menu, the website rather, and review all of the webinars that are available to you for free from the TI website. So with the other thing we have to talk about a bit are the different platforms. Now, you and I are most accustomed to using Zoom. WebEx is another one that I've used quite a bit. I used to teach for UNLV, and WebEx was their preferred platform when we had to do online classes and what have you. And also my HOA, I'm on the board of directors for my homeowners association. That's another fun task I have. And we use WebEx for all our meetings. We don't do in-person meetings anymore. Very rarely we use WebEx. Google Meet, I have used Google Meet. I didn't find it, well, all of these platforms have similarities. So the skills that you have in Zoom will translate to some of these other platforms. Maybe not directly, there may be some little quirks here and there, but they do translate because they have a lot of similarities like screen sharing, like chat, muting and unmuting, those kinds of things. So Google Meet I have used actually for my Lions Club board of directors meetings, but we're back to meeting in person now. Microsoft Teams is another platform that the Region 2 program quality directors, we use that for communication. I find it to be a little clunky and awkward to use, so it's not my favorite platform. And then Skype is probably actually the older type of platform, similar to Zoom. Skype has been around a long time, and it's actually a pretty decent platform, but not a lot of folks use it. Now, the other thing that we were talking about is different equipment. You and I are both using a camera, for example, that's built into our, at least for me, our desktop, and I assume you're using a desktop. I also have a camera built into my laptop when I'm on that, but you can also use your cell phone camera to go online and to attend meetings. The quality of that equipment is very, very important in terms of what kind of experience your users are going to have. The microphone, I did find us that it got good reviews. It's a two-way microphone. It acts both as a speaker and a microphone so that people who are watching a presentation on Zoom and they are speaking, they will be heard. So a good microphone, a good camera are essential. A good laptop. That's also something that you need. You can't, if it's too old and clunky, I know, because I have one that's too old and clunky, I can't use it all. I think it's back to around Windows 8 or something like that is the operating system that's on it. All of these things have to be, they don't have to be thousands of dollars, but it's still an investment. And then, of course, I talked about cell phone as another option to create a camera or have a view. And I know the folks at Windjammers are really good at that. If you've ever attended their meetings or.
Absolutely, but you know, they have a station wagon that's full of equipment, including a curtain that they hang up over a window that lets the sun in. But yes, they have got it down to science of how to go in there and set up their equipment so that everyone can see the people that are on Zoom and Zoom sees the audience.
Exactly. And if you go to a meeting, or even if you look online, you're right. There are laptops and cameras and cell phones set up so that they have cameras. Mm-hmm. It's really impressive. And I know they meet at Skinny Dugan's, which is where I used to meet when early risers used to meet when we met in person. And the Wi-Fi there is pretty darn good, I thought. Our Toastmasters meets there too, right?
Right. Tomorrow morning, we will have a meeting there at 8 a.m. Anybody that wants to come to Skinny Dugan's, I'm going to talk about my trip to Africa.
Ooh.
So please come and visit us.
That's going to be awesome. I saw some of the pictures on Facebook, and that will be great. I'm going to attend. But I think I'm going to have to attend online because of another commitment.
Well, you know, I thought about an online speech just so I could show all my photos, but I don't know whether that's what I want to do or not. You're supposed to be speaking, so I wanted to be able to put the words out there and people get their own photos in their minds.
I understand completely. Well, you can still do a PowerPoint. You can embed some of those photos in PowerPoint. But the last thing on equipment I wanted to mention, which I've talked about before, is the Wi-Fi. Whatever venue you're in, you're going to sink or swim based on that Wi-Fi. Now, I think a couple of things about an online audience that are different. We have to adjust our thinking a bit because the online audience is different. For one thing, folks tend to have a shorter attention span. And I tell you where you see this a lot is like if you want to stop your video. I've had situations where people stop their video, but they get up and leave. You don't know this. You think, oh, okay, they've stopped their video and they're listening. But I've gone back to call on them or ask a question and discovered, much to my chagrin, that there was no one there. So we do have a bit of a shorter attention span when it comes to an online audience. And this is one of the things that is talked about in the articles I'm going to give to you. People feel isolated and disconnected online. And this, I think, was something that the school systems learned, how important that in-person interaction is, and that you can find yourself feeling disconnected from your audience because you see everybody in a box and it's not that kind of the same kind of interaction. It's very different, and it can lead to some real issues in terms of your feelings of isolation. And then, of course, we talked about technical issues. They are just around the corner in every meeting and in every Zoom. So one of the things that you really have to do if you're giving an online presentation is to think about engagement. How do you best engage your audience, given the limitations that an online presentation has? Well, some of the things that you use in person are the same things you're going to want to use online, like vocal variety. In fact, I would argue things like vocal variety, your facial expression, your hand gestures, eye contact, and movement within the frame are even more important online than they are in person. And that's because you are speaking within a frame, and you just have so much room to create hand gestures.
Have to be high. not down here level. They have to be high.
Exactly, and make sure that you know where your hands are and what you're doing with them, and use your vocal variety in any movement within that frame. You know, for example, if you're giving a speech and you're in person, you've got the stage that you can move around on, and it becomes a tool. But if you're online, it's a very different world. You have to be cautious about moving out of frame. I was watching a speaker, I can't remember what club it was, but the speaker's head was cut off. From here up, it was outside the frame, and that's because he stood up and he didn't have his camera adjusted properly, and he didn't realize it right away. So for 30, 90 seconds, there's a headless voice coming out of the speakers. So you got to be cautious about that. You got to be cognizant. You need to make sure that you engage your audience using a lot of the same tools that you would in person, but they take on a different perspective. They're very different when you're online versus in person. And then, of course, my favorite, using presentation software, like what we're looking at now. It can enhance your talk or detract from your talk. I hope that I've become skilled enough using presentation software that it does enhance. Because what I like about it is it puts things on the screen that your audience can actually take a picture of. For example, in a minute, when I get to my references, I will invite our viewers to take a picture of the screen so they'll know what articles I liked. And there are many others. These are just several that I liked. But that is part of the whole thing. You take a picture of the screen now, and you don't have to scribble down your notes of the references. So tools and techniques, again, presentation software, larger font size if you're online as we are, because it shrinks down a little bit depending on the device you're using. So you want to make sure it can be seen. Generally fewer items per page. And what I'm doing here, you can tell I'm listing one line at a time so that you don't get caught up reading this list of bullet points, but you do have an opportunity to stay with the speaker, staying with their presentation. And maybe higher color contrasts. You want to be careful about using color. Even in person, when you're in person, you want to be careful in a presentation package to be careful about the use of color, because sometimes if you use the wrong colors and the contrast is very low, your audience is not going to be able to see it, particularly that people may be in the back of the room. And you can verbalize your pauses, and because if you're watching and there's a pause, you're like, oh, is he frozen? No. So you might want to start out saying, we're going to take a little pause here so that we're going to do an instant poll. That's a good example of something that you might do in a presentation. But verbalize that pause and say, tell your audience, here's what we're going to do. So don't freak out. We're not freezing. Our technology's not crashing. And you may have a little bit of a faster pace. I don't know if you've noticed that. And until I was read this article, there seems to be a tendency, not for everyone, but to speak a little faster for some reason. They think, oh, I got to get through with this. This is where you really have to work on your pacing and speed of your presentation. And remember our discussion of Yodely. I don't know if you've had a chance to play with it yet, but that can help you a lot, because one of the things it will measure is your centering on the screen and your pacing. So just be cognizant of that. Excuse me. And then, of course, there are presenter variables. I love this picture that I found online. All these various facial expressions is just great. One of the things that's a presenter variable is audience involvement. How do you get the audience involved and keep that? That's part of engagement, but it's also part of the variables that each of us as presenters have to address. What do we do that ensures audience involvement so that, you know, our audience isn't falling asleep? Pacing we talked about, and it needs to be well rehearsed. The things we just talked about: vocal variety, facial expressions, hand gestures, and movement. One of the dangers of online presentations is, I don't know if you've had a speaker who is obviously got their notes up in the corner of the screen and they're reading them. That's why you need to rehearse, because that becomes obvious of what's going on. So you want to watch that and be cognizant of it. And then you want to have a balanced focus, whether you are in the room or online. Remember that you do have two audiences now. You have people who are live in person together, and you have people who are in the hybrid portion, in the online portion. Keep that awareness and try to make sure you balance how you direct your time. Okay, here we go. Toastmasters Magazine, and I'll get these 3 or so references, and I'll tell you there's a lot of really good stuff in Toastmasters Magazine on hybrid meetings, on using different online platforms and what have you. But I really liked this. This one is Presenting Today's Virtual World by Dave Zelinsky is one. Prepare Your Technology Like a Pro. Gregory, and I think it's the Z is Schlossler. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. And then finally, Present with an Executive Presence online with Christine Clapp. Our audience can take a picture there. I'm going to leave it on the screen here for a second or two. You can take a picture of this and go back to TI and search for these magazine articles in the Toastmasters magazine. I used all of them, bits and pieces of all of them, to sort of put this presentation together, and I think you'll find a great deal of interesting stuff. So I'm going to stop sharing there. What do you think, Phyllis?
Well, I think in-person meetings, we have our screen set up so that there is a screen on the lectern where you can look at it while you're speaking and see the audience, the people that are on Zoom. And there's also a photo of the room on that layout. And what I have found is all the roles do a great job of looking at the audience, both in person and on the screen. Everything goes well, except for the speaker. And when the speaker is definitely someone that's used to doing staging, they want to move out of the area that's covered by the Zoom camera. And it's like, do I step up and say, point of order, you're not on the screen anymore? Or do you just let them go and say, you know, you've got to watch this little screen on the lectern that tells you that you can't go any further, or your audience that's on Zoom is not going to see you. So it's technique. But the ones I find are the people that are used to giving speeches and moving around the room, and they forget, you know, they're just used to doing that staging, making points, first point, second point, you know, and they have trouble with it. So that's one of the things that in-person speeches have to be sure that they keep within the visual range of the camera that's shooting your photo out to the Zoom world.
Well, that's exactly my problem. When I'm in person, I tend to forget about the camera. So I'm glad you brought that up. Well, we are a little bit over time today. Yeah, it's 6:34. All of a sudden it came up. I want to remind folks that Wake Up with Toastmasters is on Monday through Friday. We have different hosts. So Phyllis and I are usually together on Tuesday. But on Mondays and Fridays, we have our district director, Gene Williams. On Wednesdays, right now, we have Jennifer Smith and Doris Tuckett. Doris and Jennifer have been working together and switch hitting, so to speak, on Wednesdays. Doris is the president of Toastmasters in the Kitchen. And then, of course, on Thursdays, we have Scott and Phyllis, although Scott, as I mentioned earlier, is ill today. So if you'd like to be on Wake Up with Toastmasters, just give us a shout out and we will get you scheduled. You'll have an opportunity to tell us about your Toastmasters journey and to talk about your club. Coming up this Saturday, the 7th, is our online TLI. This is our second online TLI. So if you haven't received your second round of training, please get in touch, sign up. The link is in the newsletter. If you can't find it, then look in the newsletter. And then on the 14th, we will have our Educational Enrichment Night, and it will include a presentation from our guest from District 55 in Texas, Kyle Mitchell, who will be talking about hybrid meetings, best practices for hybrid meetings. He handles all of their hybrid meetings and does a lot of podcasts and what have you for District 55. Let's see, anything I forgot, Phyllis?
Game night.
Game night, thank you. Yes, game night is the last Saturday of the month. Again, the link can be found in the newsletter, and that's at 6 p.m., right? Starting at 6 p.m. on the last Saturday of the month.
On the last Saturday.
And it's a lot of fun. Games like Trivial Pursuit or Jeopardy or Pictionary. I know they've had an escape room game, and Gene is working on a murder mystery. So it's a lot of fun. It's just an opportunity to get together in a bit of a different environment from what you might expect from Toastmasters. And then on January 21st, we will have our in-person TLI. That's going to be at the East Las Vegas Library on East Bonanza. Information will be coming out about that. Actually, I think this afternoon I'll have everything ready for announcements. And there's just a lot going on in District 115. But it's time to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Phyllis, as always. It's wonderful to see you. I appreciate you're so jovial early in the mornings. You're like me. I'm an early riser, and I know you too. So bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a great day.
We will see you next week.